Ha, get fucked, gamer. I broke the game.
When
I
I
gave
was
myself
18,
I gave
18
myself
years
too
old.
many coins.
When I was 18 years old, I saw it.
I'm
First
not
time
recording.
in my life. I saw an image of Cloudy. I'm recording. I saw a comic strip,
Why?
a 3-panel comic strip.
Why though?
Though
Why?
simple as it seems,
Why are you
changed
recording
me,
this?
changed
What do
my being,
you gain from this?
changed who
What do
I
you
am,
gain from this?
made me
Charcoal?
who I am,
Charcoal?
enlightened
Charcoal.
me. The strip
What do
Garfield,
you gain?
the comic
What
strip was
do
new,
you
no
gain
more
from
than
this?
maybe a
There's
month and a
nothing
half
to
since
gain.
inception.
There's no
Since
point in this.
coming
There's
into
no point in
existence.
living. Everyone
There was
dies in the end.
There it
Do
was
you
before
really
me
think
in print.
this will
I
improve
saw
your
it, a
time on
comic
this
strip.
earth? Wasting your
What was
time
it called?
to your stupid
Garfield.
house to
The
that
story
goddamn
heroes of a
Garfield?
man, a
You
plain
think
man.
this
Here's
is a
John.
good use of your
But
time?
here's
You
more
should
than
be
that.
out
I
there
will get
in the
to this
world
later. But
doing
first,
something.
Let us say that John, he's a plain man, and then there's a cat, Garfield. There is a cat, Garfield. This is the nature of the world here. When I see the world, the politics, the future, there's satellites in space, and there's people who put them there. You can look at everything as a man and a cat, two beings in harmony and war. So the strip I saw, this man, the John and the cat Garfield, you see, yes, it is about everything. This little comic. Not so little anymore. So yes, when I was 18, I saw this comic, and it hit me all at once. It's power. I clipped it, and every day I looked at it. And I said, okay, let me look at this here. What is this doing to me? Why is this so powerful? John Arbuckle, he sits there, legs crossed, comfortable in his home, and he reads his newspaper. The news of the world, perhaps, and he extends his fingers lightly, delicately. He taps his fingers on end table and feels for something. What is it? It's something he needs, but is not there. And then he looks up, slightly cockeyed, and he thinks. His newspaper's in his lap now, and he thinks now where could my pipe be? I always come to this, because I was a young man, I'm older now, and I still don't have the secrets, the answers. So this question still rings true. John looks up, and he thinks, now where could my pipe be? And then it happens, you see it. You see, it's almost like a divine intervention. Suddenly it's there, and it overpowers you. The cat is smoking a pipe. It is the man's pipe, John's pipe, but the cat, this cat, Garfield, is smoking the pipe from afar, and someplace near but not clear, The man calls out, John calls out, and he is shocked. Garfield, he shouts. Garfield, the cat's name, but let's take a step back. Let us examine this from all sides, all perspectives. And when I came across this comic strip, I was at my father's house. A newspaper had arrived, and I picked it up for him, and I brought it inside. I organized its sections for him. And then, yes, this comic strip section fell out from somewhere in the middle and landed on the kitchen floor. I picked up the paper pages and saw, up somewhere near the top of the strip, just like John, I was wearing an aquamarine shirt. So I saw, interesting, I'll have to see this later. I snipped out the little comic and held on to it, and 5 days later I re-examined it, and it gripped me. I needed to find out more about this. The information I had was minimal, but enough. An orange cat named Garfield, okay. That seemed to be the linchpin of this whole operation. Yes, another clue. A signature in the bottom right corner, a man's name, Jim Davies. Yes, I'm onto it for sure. So 1, Garfield, orange cat, and 2, Jim Davies, the creator of this cat. And that curiously plain man, I did not know at the time his name was John. The strip, you see, had no mention of this man's name, and I'd never seen it before, but I had these clues. Jim Davies, Garfield. And then I saw more. I spotted the tiny copyright mark in the upper left corner. Copyright 1978 to what's this? Copyright belongs to Paws Incorporated. I used the local library and the mail services to track down the information I was looking for. Jim Davies, a cartoonist, had created a comic strip about a cat, Garfield, and a man, John Arbuckle. Well, from that point on, I made sure I read the Garfield comic strips. As I read each one, each day passed, the strips seemed to resonate with me less and less. I sent letters to Paws Incorporated, long letters, pages upon pages, asking if Mr. Jim Davies could somehow publish just the one comic over and over again.
Why you're doing this.
I'm gonna upload to YouTube. It would be meditative, I wrote.
Why?
The strength of that, could you imagine? But no response. The strips lost their power, and eventually I stopped reading.
They're gonna have to laugh.
But I did not want my perceptions diluted. I am devoted to this, so I vowed to read the pipe strip over and over again. This is what I call it. The pipe strip. The pipe strip. Everything about it is perfect. I can only describe it as a miracle creation. Something came together. The elements aligned. It is like
And after
The
into a
comets,
video
the cosmic
no one
orchestra
will
that is up
see.
there over your
No
head, the
one will
immense,
view
enormous
this
void
recording. No one.
is working all for one thing, to tell you one thing.
One
Also,
thing,
your
a
voice is
YouTube
in it.
video, a
Gas and
YouTube
rock
video,
is
a video
purity
on a
and
site that is
nothing.
crashing and
I will
burning.
say this.
Nobody will see it.
When
No
I
one
see
will
the
care.
vibe strip,
No
and I
one
mean
will
every
seek
single time I look at the
entertainment.
lines,
You
the
are
colors, the
wasting your
shapes
time, your precious
that make
time
up
on
the
this earth.
3-panel
Everyone
comic,
dies
I see
someday.
perfection. Do
Do
I
you
find
want your
perfection in
time
many
to be spent
things?
doing this?
Some things I would say.
This,
Some things
of
are
all
perfect,
things,
and this is one of them.
this is
I
what you
can look
think
at the
is
little
worth your
tuft of
time.
hair on John's
Not
on John
helping the
Arbuckle's head. This
homeless,
is the perfect shape.
feeding
The perfect
starving
purple pipe in
children,
Garfield's mouth. How could
volunteering
Immortal
to
even
build a
make
house.
this? I have a theory about Jim Davies about. After
This is
copious
really
research, and yes, of
the
course, now we have
best
the
use of
internet,
your
all this
time.
information readily available. But Jim Davies, he used his life experiences to implement this comic. Like I mentioned before, none of them seems to have the weight of the pipe strip, but you have to wonder about the man who's even just once created perfect form. The literally flawless execution of art, brilliance, just as an award. I think there is a spiritual element at work. I've seen my share of bad times, and when you have something, well, it's just emotions and neurons in your brain, but something tells you that it's the truth. Truth's radiant light. Garfield, the cat and neurons in my brain, it's harmony. It's harmony, you see. It's John and Garfield. It's truly harmony, like a continuous looping, everlasting harmony. Lavender chair on the brown end table, the salmon-colored wall, the forest green carpeting. Garfield is hunched, perched, perhaps the pipe stuck firmly between his jowls. His tail curls around its modern shapes too, because okay, stay with me. I've done this experiment several times. You take the strip, you trace only the basic elements. You can do anything. You can simplify the shapes down to just blobs, just outlines, but it still makes sense. You can replace the blobs with magazine cutouts of other things. Replace John Arbuckle with a car parked in a driveway sideways. Cut that out of a magazine, stick it in, replace him there with a second panel with a first processor. Okay, and then we put a picture of the planet in the third panel with Garfield. It still works. There is a universal proportions. I don't know how best to explain why it works. I've studied the pipe strip and analyzed John and Garfield's proportions against several universal mathematical constants. E, pi, the golden ratio, the Feinbaum constant, and so on, and it's surprising, scary even how things align. You can take just tiny pieces of the pipe strip, for instance, take John's elbow from the second panel, and take that and project it back over John's entire shape in the second panel, and you see a near-perfect Fibonacci sequence emerge. It's a read to me, and it makes you wonder if you're in the presence of a deity, if there's some larger hand at work. There's no doubt in my mind that Jim Davies is a smart man.
Are we gonna play the game or not?
Jim Davies is capable of anything to me. He's remarkable, but this is so far beyond that. I think we might see that this work of art is revered and respected in years to come. Jim Davies is possibly a new master of the craft, a genius of the eye. They very well may say the same thing about Jim Davies in the 500 years. We say about the great philosophical and artistic masters from centuries ago. Jim Davies is a modern-day Socrates or Da Vinci, mixing both striking visual beauty with classical daring unheard of intellect. Look, he combines these things to make profoundly simple expressions. The strip is his masterpiece, the pipe strip is his masterpiece, and his masterpiece in a marble. I look at Garfield's particular pose in this strip. He's poised and statuesque. His cat scare is reminiscent of the fiery gazes often found in religious iconography, but still his eyes are playful, lying somewhere in between the solemn father's expression and Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son and the coy smirk of Da Vinci's Saint on the Baptist. His ears stick up, signifying a peaked readiness. It's as if he could at any moment pounce. He is, after all, a close relative and descendant of the mighty jungle cats of Africa that could leap after prey. You could see the power drawn into Garfield's hindquarters, a powerful haunches indeed. The third panel, and I'm just saying this now, this is coming to me. The third panel of the pipe strip is essentially a microcosm for the entire strip itself. All the power dynamics, the struggle for superiority, right? Who has the pipe? Where's the pipe? All of that is drawn, built, layered into Garfield's iconic pose here. You can see it in the curl of his tail. Garfield's ears, whiskers stick up on end. The smoke billows upward, drawing the eye upward. increasing the scope, I'm just amazed really that after 33 years of reading and analyzing the same comic strip, I'm able to find new dimensions. It's a testament to the work. For 6 years, I delved into tobacco research because can a cat smoke? This is a metaphysical question. Yes, can any cat smoke? Do we know? Can just Garfield smoke? The research says no. Nicotine poisoning can kill animals, especially household pets. All it takes is the nicotine found in as little as a single cigarette. Surely John's pipe hold a substantial amount of tobacco. It is true that pets living in the homes of smokers are nearly 25% more likely to develop some sort of cancer, most likely due to secondhand smoke, but these are facts of smoking. It's tolls on our worlds. But after visiting 2 tobacco processing plants in Virginia and the Phillips Morris cigarette manufacturing facility, I came no closer to cracking the meaning. I was looking for any insight as detective on a homicide case to look at every angle, so I'm always taking apart the pipe strike. I focused on every minute, no, every detail of the strip. John Hopkins clothing. I have replicas. I am an expert in textiles, so you see this smoking thing was a hang-up for me. But it was the statement here until this key. This is the breakthrough. The pipe is not really a pipe. Obviously, there is symbolism at work here. I saw that from the beginning, and I looked at the literal aspects of the strip to gain insight into the metaphors at play. I worked at a newspaper printing press for 18 months in the late 1980s. I was learning the literal to inform the gestural. The subliteral and the in-between. John reading the newspaper means so much more to me than just John reading the newspaper. But how could you ever hope to decipher the puzzle without knowing everything there is to know about newspapers? Okay, for example, John holds his newspaper up with his left hand, thumb gripping the interior. I learned that this particular grip here was the newspaper grip of 19th century aristocrats. This aristocrat grip was the point of tension that influenced the decision to move forwards with the prohibition in the United States in the early 20th century. So John's hand position is much more than it. It is a comment on class war and the resulting reactionary culture, but I didn't know about the aristocrat newspaper grip until I came across some microfiche archives at the printing press. It's about information. You have to take it apart, and the breakthrough on the smoking cat came late. Just 8 years ago, actually. The smoking cat is an industry term. It's what smoking is, recalls a tattletale teenager who tells on his friends after they've all tried smoking for the first time, and there's actually a foreign translation, bastardization of the term smoking rat. But the phrase was confused when secret documents went back and forth between China and America. These documents are still secret. The only reason I know about them is because I know a man, my friend. Let's tell him Timothy. Yes, yeah. It's a fake name for his protection. Timothy worked for Philip Morris for 16 years. And he has seen the documents, and when he told me, it was an aha moment. He said, but how? How could this cartoonist, Jim Davis, know about this obscure term from the mid-70s used exclusively by a few cigarette companies? This is still a mystery to me, but I connect the dots by noting Jim Davies' childhood experiences on a farm. He must have seen something. What could it be? Timothy went on to tell me there was one particular smoking cat. A boy from, yes, Indiana. A boy named Ernie Barguckle. I'm only on the second part. Who became a thorn in the side of the tobacco companies for a couple of years. He did more than tattle to his parents. And his family took legal action. They eventually received a huge settlement payout. But that name is too similar. Ernie Barguckle, John Arbuckle. John Davies must have used this. There's more here. Ernie Barguckle spent nearly half of that settlement money on experimental medical procedures to cure his impotence. He was impotent, so he was smoking. He was a smoking cat with a metaphorical pipe that did not work. Are you starting to see the layers here? This is exciting stuff. You start to get a whole picture here, and it forms the work. It's just remarkable. Jim Davies took these raw ideas, these pieces, and he transformed them into some smart social commentary that is also ravishingly beautiful. I have cried, I've cried, I've cried, I've cried, cried over this piece. It just gets in my soul. I try to explain this to people. I have the newspaper articles about Ernie Barguckle. People have fought me on this. They don't see it, or they're closed-minded. How could a comic strip about a cat smoking a pipe mean anything more than that? But it is more. And when I feel spiritual or start to think existentially, I still see this comic. Here's something from 1981 that I wrote in thinking about the implications of this strip. This is just an excerpt here. There's more before and after, but this part is the essence to me. If a comic about a cat smoking a pipe can be the only thing in the universe, then maybe this is the strongest evidence for that. Many of you say, "Oh, but I'm not blind. I've never been blind." But when you truly see, you will understand just how truly blind you once were, to even think it right to say you are not blind. What does a blind man see? Blackness, darkness, blackness, blank darkness. Dark blankness, the absence of things. Quite literally, no thing, nothings. Nothings, so you see nothing, and I bring you into the light. A cat has your pipe. You've been blind. Do you understand this? The cat has your pipe. You can't fully immerse yourself. You don't have the light. You don't have the radiance, the radical light, the radically radiant light of truth, and truth's belonging love, and nature of light, and loving truthful radiance, so don't be bold, and make bold statements. I know of you, the cat has your pipe, the cat has your pipe, remember that. That writing, well, it's kind of rough, kind of an early 80s feel, and I see that, but I'm still proud of it. Sometimes I imagine that this is the editorial column in the newspaper John Arbuckle is reading. It is an exercise in recursion. It's like a vortex opens up. It's like you hold two mirrors up to each other. One is reality and the other is a cartoon strip. Let's see here. Yes, I must bring this up. Because I think surely Jim Davies is again speaking on multiple levels by including the details set before us in the comic. Notice the glimpse of John Arbuckle's foot in the first panel. The size of the shoe would indicate that maybe the man has just has small feet. But deeper investigation takes us to the foot-binding rituals of certain Asian cultures, inflicted usually on women for the desire of men. This practice was incredibly painful and crippling. Aha! Master Davies is here presenting us with a man, or rather man, who engages in foot-binding, a body modification for women, on top of being without his pipe, or impotent. This is a man facing an extreme inner turmoil. The panel tells us this story. Subconsciously, notice the background wall shading of the first panel points inward towards John in the second panel, and the sharp tapered end of the purple pipe in the third frame also points at John in the second panel, inward. The eye is drawn to the center panel. You can connect these 2 points and draw a triangle across the panels, and this triangle will align with the reoriented points of John's collar. This is majestic artwork, and to uncover this hidden order is bliss like I've never known. Comforting in an empty world. I can't help but read the thought bubble over and over again. Now where could my pipe be? Now where could my pipe be? It is a profound question. Why am I here? What is my purpose? It is reflection and self-examination. Here, it is facing the dust, the misery of a cold, careless universe. You can feel the weight of it, but where could my pipe be? One imagines the author, Jim Davies, teetering on the edge of insanity, his rationality, his lucidity hovering over the void, and he seeks the truth. You can see the aligned quality of the drawings, the thoughtful, controlled outlines mixed with the occasional chaotic scribbles at work in the shadows and Garfield's dark stripes. It's almost as if Garfield is chaos himself. Yes, he is the embodiment of chaos, disorder, hatred, fear, thievery, death, destruction, dissolution. These are the things Garfield represents. He stole the pipe. He sits with his back to John. Garfield, this chaos cat. Garfield has turned his back on everything, everyone. One recalls the great existential forces in literature. Camus's Misolt, Kafka's Gregor Samsa, or Sartre's Antoine Roquentin. Garfield the cat sees the hopelessness of life, which, yes, this is why Jim Davies has chosen smoking. It represents a recklessness, a disregard for what some would define as the beauty of life. Garfield may die from the nicotine. He may not. He defies life. He sits defiant, saying nothing, but looking as if he could say, then let me die. It does not matter. It does not matter, and we are faced with this. Could John behave the same? Is John the glimmer of hope? He seems to be unsure. Again, his question, now where can my pipe be, indicates that he is wrestling with his own existence. The center panel centers this issue, and again, it hearkens to many of the great religious works of art. I'm talking about the pipe stroke in relation to religion. It's interesting to assign the roles of God and anti-God, or as many may know him to be, the devil, or on a larger scale, simply the forces of good and evil. Garfield, the thief cat, evil and malicious. Here's the devil placed to the right, and note the two forms of John. The John on the left, still innocent. He's draped in the delight, the lack of knowledge. Here's the humans in the Garden of Eden. He feels for his pipe, but he has yet to eat from the tree. And Garfield, the sinister serpent. And notice how Jim Davies framed this. The center John is locked in a struggle between his innocence and his knowledge of the truth, the knowledge of the existence of evil. It is stunning, the great struggle, the struggle that transcends time, and Jim Davies floats over all of this as creator, the god of sorts, in his own right, and he presents this cautionary message to us all. It is as if he's speaking from high, and he's saying unto our awaiting ears, where will you be when the cat reveals himself? I can tell you where you'll be. You will have a choice. You can face endless suffering and eternal misery. You can be forced and beaten down by barbarians who claw at each other just for a view of salvation. They'll tear your eyeballs out and rip your gizzards from end to end. They worship this cat, this false idol, this evil, horrible cat. Do not be seduced by the cat in the pipe. Garfield, thy name is a mark of the demons of hell. Something like this, and to those listening, this is a stark reminder to follow the path of the first panel. John, be humble, be grateful, honor the law and honor thyself. Be true and be good, and no harm will come to you. Pray for salvation, and it will be granted unto you. Be like John Arbuckle as he lowers his head. Be like John Arbuckle as he lowers his paper. As he turns his head, bow with John Arbuckle and praise unto the Creator, Jim Davies, and banish Demon Garfield from your life. So what is all this? What am I saying? Aha. What does all this mean? Why is this one comic strip so important to me, and why do I feel the need to share this obligation? I have an obligation to you all. This is a redemption. This is a belief in redemption, a sacrifice of all the obvious trappings of this false modern life. Look at the simplicity in this strip, in the pipe strip. Look at all the simple clothes John wears. Look at his simple basic furniture. No adornments on the wall. Even the very pipe his cat Garfield stole. It is a plain, modest pipe, and I have adapted to this way of life. It speaks to me in our times. Well, you don't need me to point out the hyperbole of our times. You have children being born 8 or 9 at a time. You have more money being spent on a single Hollywood movie than some nations can spend, feeding their starving people torture, distrust. Look around you. It's overwhelming. What can you contribute? And every day I look in the mirror, and I hold this comic up to the mirror and look in the mirror, and this little comic strip, be humble, be thankful. It is a reminder, be respectful. You are a statue, you are fragile. When you break, when you shatter, where will those pieces go? Ask, 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 ask. This question, will you ask? Humankind is only as great as you. You, the individual, it begins and ends with you. You must treat this expedition, this search, this life with a reverence and intensity, found only in the smallest sticks, the littlest leaf, the tiniest stone, the most minuscule grain of sand on a beach of billions. This is the secret. Do you want the pipe? Do you want to know where the pipe is gone? You ask yourself. You ask. You ask. You ask. Now where could my pipe be? When I was a young man, remember now. I first saw this comic when I was 18 years old, ages ago, but I was youthful, vibrant. For weeks I didn't hide that a comic strip was having such a profound effect on me. I was much like John Arbuckle. I was much like John Arbuckle. I was much like John Arbuckle. In this middle panel he says, "Now where can my pipe be?" You could look into his eyes, his half-lowered eyes, and think to yourself, "Now surely, John, surely you cannot be this naive. This is nothing new for you." And if you've read more of the Garfield comic strips by Jim Davies, you understand why I'm saying now. Garfield the cat does things like this all the time. He will take things from food from John, food, items, anything. This is adventure. So you see this and you want to say, "John Arbor, come now, you are lying to yourself. You are lying to yourself and to all of us if you pretend to have not any idea of where your pipe has gone. Perhaps you think you've left it somewhere else. But, you are not so forgetful. You are lying to yourself. Ah, yes, you are lying to yourself, John Arbuckle. You know that Garfield has the pipe. Somewhere deep down you know this. You don't even need to think the question." And that was me when I saw the strip. 1 week passed, and each morning I would open my drawer and slam it shut again. I would need to look at the comic. But I'd pause and think, "Oh no, I don't need this comic. I don't need to look at it." But there I was, lying to myself. I did need to see it. And so I did. It's cathartic. You give in, and that's the transition from the second panel of life to the third panel of life. It's a simple story structure. The passage from the second panel of life, from the second act to the third, the twilight of things. John gives into his suspicions. He knows the truth. He's always known the truth. He yells out, "Garfield! Garfield! Garfield!" It's like pressure from a steam valve being released. The build-up is unbearable. And then, it's all gone. So it is like this. When I speak about the truth, the light, the radiance, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is the essence of this brilliant work of art, the practical mixing, meeting, agreeing with the spiritual. It's all here. But spirituality is not an easy thing to confront. You might find yourself able to wrap your mind around a simple math problem or a basic newspaper article, but intellect is much less subjective. What is spirituality? And how have I found spiritual peace and serenity in Garfield? A long time ago, after I encountered the pipe strip, I spent some time, as I mentioned, before soul searching. When something impacts you or alters your very perception so greatly, there is a long period of confusion, recovery time. It's as if you don't know who you are, and that can be a very scary prospect, especially if you thought you had a good grasp on that sort of thing. Imagine if Jim Davies did not know who he was. Would he be capable of shaping the cultural landscape as he's done? No, of course he wouldn't. And how about his characters? John, what if Jim Davies suddenly woke up and didn't know who John was? What if he couldn't make the informed decisions to accurately depict Garfield's personality because he could no longer specify or demarcate the boundaries of Garfield's behavior? What kind of comic would that be? You see, so draw the parallel. I saw this comic and yes, I was disoriented. And if I didn't reconcile this issue with myself, what kind of person would I be? Undoubtedly dire circumstances. But remember, this was not a math problem. This was not an article. This was not something I could just figure out, and as skeptical as I was, I realized that faith and spirituality were avenues that required exploring. At first I tried long nights reading Garfield by candlelight, or aromatic meditation settings while thinking of Garfield. But nothing snapped, nothing clicked. I still felt lost, but I kept it up. I hired a shaman and a young personal yogi Sikh guru, Avram Dab Singh Sahib. I pushed and pushed. I determined to find myself. And then a miracle happened. Upon retrieving my morning paper to clip the Garfield comic, I noticed a young girl selling lemonade 2 houses down. She sat occupied at her stand. She had no customers in sight, so I approached and saw that she was coloring. I looked at her drawing. 3 rectangular boxes, a man in a blue shirt, an orange cat. I knew what this was. Even in her crude scribbles, I knew exactly what this was. She was drawing the Garfield comic. I looked at her words, and I saw that in her strip, John asked Garfield to retrieve a newspaper. Funny. Since I've done that with myself, Garfield is sarcastic, but agrees to. He returns and calls John Sahib. John exclaims that the papers will chewed up, but then Garfield says, and I quote, "Sahib asks fish, paper is wet. Sahib asks cat, paper is holy." I remember the words and ran back to my house and thought how odd that Sahib shows up in the strip. And my spiritual advisor's name is Avram Dab Singh Sahib. Coincidence, surely, but nonetheless I spent the next 16 hours poring through my clipped Garfield comics, looking for the strip this young girl had been coloring. I could not find it. I eventually fell asleep right on my kitchen table. The next morning I retrieved my paper again and I clipped the Garfield comic. The date was July 12th, 1983. There it was, the Sahib strip in all its glory. The girl had been drawing the next day's strip. So I ran out of my house, ran back to where she was, but she was gone, and in place of the lemonade stand was a for sale sign. They'd moved out. I rushed back to my house to call Avram, but I was informed that he'd moved away as well. I reeled for several hours, and then it all connected for me. It was meant to be. It was meant to be this way. Jim Davies, John Garfield. It was always meant to be this way for me. They moved to the forefront and everything else fades away. Everything else. The girl, the lemonade stand, Avram Dab Singh Sahib. It all existed to show me the way. And when I found the way, everything else melted away. It was a beautiful miracle. And of July 27th, 1978, the day I saw the pipe strip was the first day of my life. Then that day, July 12th, 1983, was the second day of my life. And I've never looked back. Garfield has transformed me, and I am a man born anew because of Garfield. When I was in my mid-30s, I was interviewed for a documentary. It was a documentary of on the subject of cat behavior. Now I've had cats my whole life. I have three cats now. And at the time of this documentary interview, I had 4 cats. I sat down for the interview and was joined by a veterinarian who specialized in felines. Dr. Caroline Wellmitz was her name, and I believe. And the doctor discussed color blindness in animals and how it affects their behavior. She specifically brought up the fact that cats are red-green colorblind. They can see colors, but they can't tell the difference between red and green. And look at the color choice in the strip here. Garfield sits on a green floor behind a pinkish red wall. I heard this and I immediately pulled a copy of the comic from my wallet to show the doctor. I moved so fast, I'm sure I nearly scared her. I pointed at the paper and said, like this, look at this here. This cat Garfield, he's colorblind, that must be the answer here like this. As overexcited as I was, I managed to take in her response. She said, yes, a cat in this room would have a hard time differentiating the wall from the floor. Add that to a cat's known spatial confusion and you have the makings of a cat rage room. Now, she informed me that this isn't exactly common knowledge among cat owners, but as a seasoned cat owner, or someone particularly perceptive, will have picked up on it. So, what's incredible here is not only Garfield's behavior, is Garfield's behavior symbolic of the devil? And they're all the evil constructs in the world, but also it is rooted in science and scientific fact. Look at that, you cannot spell fact without cat. Ha, just a little joke there, just some wordplay, but getting back on track, and you can't spell track. You can't spell track without cat. Okay, I digress. I gotcha, enough. Enough kidding around. It is established here that Garfield is in a rage, an ultimate rage of fury and hatred. Caused by colorblindness. We know the what, we know the why, but let us examine the how. The how of this rage is particularly interesting here. We've looked at this posture and called it powerful and control, statuesque, etc. Composed rage and expect out. I've talked to a number of psychologists and psychiatrists and even a couple of anger management therapists about this concept. Could we see the same kind of behavior in a human? Is Garfield representative of something more specific than just chaos and rage? Deciphering this is going to take some perseverance for sure. The psychologist pointed to a phenomenon in humans, and yes, I believe one of the anger management counselors brought it up as well. The idea that people oftentimes will bottle their rage. Garfield the cat here, well, he can be bottling his anger inside, shoving it deep into his cat gut to ignore and deal with it later time. Well, no, that's not exactly right. Garfield has already acted out. He's already stolen the pipe. He's smoking the pipe. He's already dealt with his anger. He's already lashed out. So psychology, what is going on? Psychologically, what is going on here? What is this cat doing, and how does it impact the owner, John Arbuckle, psychologically? Well, Garfield is angry. He's acting on his anger, but is this passive anger or aggressive anger? Passive. It is passive because if Garfield has a problem with John specifically, he's choosing a passive way of dealing with that problem. He has not confronted John and said, John, I have a problem with the way you've decorated this room. As a cat, I am colorblind and this room sends me into a rage. You've created a rage room for me here. And I don't like it. I want you to change it. Instead of that confrontational approach, though, Garfield has chosen to steal John's pipe. And that, in turn, angers John, but John decides to be aggressively angry and yell at Garfield. So now, instead of a calm conversation between two respectful parties, you have two heated, angry individuals, each with a problem and no direct line to solving it. The layered emotions here tell a story with tight, focused brevity that would make Hemingway weep. This is an entire drama in just 3 panels. People. But let's not be remiss and miss the humour of the situation, the absurdity of it all, the certainty there is a reason that the visual shorthand for drama includes both the crying mask and the laughing mask. Comedy and tragedy complement each other and meld together to create drama, tension, at the height of humanity, the peak of art that reflects back to us our own condition, and here in its basis form we can laugh at this comic. Yes, comic, in which a cat smokes a pipe. When was the last time you've seen such a thing in your life? Never, I presume. I certainly never have. The Greek Muse. Tyler's presence is strong in his work of art. Here, comedy, it is comedy, and if you look at the structure again, you'll see this perfect form of thirds works magically for the transmission of yes, a joke. The joke, it is as old as time. Even cavemen told jokes. And the joke here is that John has lost his pipe, or he thinks that he has, but lo and behold, it's Garfield the cat who has the pipe. Surprise, surprise, the cat is smoking. Again, the transition from setup to punchline takes place between the second and third panels, but make no mistake, the comic is more than just a comic. Yes, it is funny, of course it is operating at the height of sophisticated humour on par with any of Shakespeare's piercing wit. On the one hand, Garfield the comic, with John the man. Humour is art. The other hand, Garfield comic, with John the man, stirring no riveting drama, as with everything, as it is tension and release a cycle. I keep returning to this idea because it is so omnipresent. Yes, you could, and yes, I have done this on more than one occasion. You could print this comic strip on a giant piece of paper. The dimensions would be something like 34 inches by 11 inches. Now tape the ends together with the comic facing inwards. Stick your head in the middle of this Garfield comic loop and read. Start at the first panel. John is reading the newspaper. He feels for something on the end table. Second panel, he sets the newspaper down. Something's not right. Where could my pipe be? He thinks. And then the payoff, the third panel. Garfield has John's pipe and is smoking it. But the paper is in a loop around your head, so you can see that once again John is in the seat reading the paper, and so on, so on. You can literally read the comic strip for an eternity. I spent many a relaxing Sunday afternoon reading the strip over and over. It reminded me of the Portuguese death carvings, which always begin and end with the same scrolled image. So this idea of repetition, of the beginning being the end, and the end being the beginning, it's not new. It's an ageist tradition among the best storytellers humanity has ever offered. And I'm not wrong to include cartoonist Jim Davies in that exalted set for this particular strip alone. I'm not foolish enough to deny that great art is subjective, divisive even, and that some people see this Garfield comic and shrug with no real reaction. But I will say that I believe everyone in the world should see it, at the very least see it. You should all see it, Read it, spend some time with it, spend an hour reading it. What's an hour? Yes, could watch some television program, you could play some fast-paced video games or computer games. Yes, you could do all those things, but it's just an hour. And if you give the strip a chance, if you look into John Arbuckle's eyes, if you look into John Arbuckle's soul, you might find that you'll really be looking into your own soul as self-discovery. That is what I'm talking about here. You have the opportunity, the possibility. It could change you. Don't be afraid. You know, just last week, I was eating lunch near the municipal court, like I do every Thursday, and there was a plumbing van parked out in front. And a plumber, would step out from the court and retrieve something from this every so often. A few times this happened. I thought nothing of it, just a plumber doing some work at the municipal court. But then he came out and looked through his van, and it was clear he couldn't find something. And I noticed, and I thought, well, that's sort of similar to the Garfield comic in a way. Someone looks at something, can't find it, but yes, that probably happens a million times a day around the world. But then this plumber put his hands on his hips. Then he scratched his head, and he said aloud, "Now where could my pipe wrench be?" Well, at this I leaped off the bench, sandwich still in hand. I rushed over. I shouted, "What was that you said?" He looked at me and said, "What? I can't find my pipe wrench." And I said, "No, no, no, say it, like how you just said it." He scratched his head and repeated, "Now where could my pipe wrench be?" I slapped him on the back and said, "Garfield." He looked so confused, so I said it again. Then I said, "Your orange cat took it." Then I laughed and laughed. And he smiled and went back into the courtroom. I walked away, knowing that the plumber and I, two complete strangers, bonded over this Garfield comic. You see, life imitates art, becomes a common ground. I have a feeling that if I see this plumber again, we'll be sharing stories like two old friends because we've been united by art. We have a common love for Jim Davies and his characters, like his writings, the humor, the drama, that rascal cat, Garfield the cat. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering, what I was having for lunch that day was a ham sandwich with an apple and potato chips. In a bag, I had a soda as well. I think it's important to view the pipe strip in philosophical terms. We've touched briefly on the notion of existentialism. That theme is very prevalent in this strip. Garfield is in fact a modern existential anti-hero, but if Garfield embodies the bewilderment in a meaningless life, what is John? What are the telltale signs that inform John's philosophical standpoint? His approach, what style of thinking he represents. John is depicted as being grounded in the material world. A world of things. He is surrounded by objects, and he touches these objects. He interacts with them. The newspaper, the end table, the chair, his clothes, all these physical things make up John's world. In some sense, even his cat Garfield is an object to him, his thing. The first ideology that comes to mind when thinking of objects in the tangible world is pragmatism. Is John Arbuckle a pragmatist? His beliefs stem from a useful, coherent view of his environment, a sort of cause and effect understanding of his world helps him. A. Deduce that his pipe is missing, and B. Catches his cat, Garfield, using the pipe. This kind of empirical and logical thinking lends credence to the idea that John is indeed a pragmatist. Although it is hard to entirely ignore the rest of the Garfield comic canon, while Garfield is consistently anarchic and embraces the chaos and absurdity of life, John Arbuckle exhibits an erratic, unpredictable mix of philosophical behaviors. At times he is borderline delusional, an idealist, an almost slap-happy version of Don Quixote. Other moments he is rigid nearly to the point of being obsessive. Somewhat like a structuralist, and certainly has streaks of sarcasm and negativity that might classify him as a skeptic. But isn't there some universal truth in this approach? How can any one man, how can John Arbuckle be just one thing? How can any of us be just one thing? We're an amalgamation of ideas, of emotions, conducts and functions, thoughts and feelings. John Arbuckle may very well inhabit tenets of nearly every major philosophical trap known to man. We all might. characters are reduced to make them recognizable, definable. A story needs a good guy, a story needs a bad guy. But rarely is one person defined in such black and white terms, even Garfield with all his bad behavior. Machiavellian motivation and general ne'er-do-well attitude can be kind and thoughtful. You just have to find the rare strip. Speaking philosophically about the entire Garfield franchise, it is an incredible accurate depiction of life. Its bold lines and bright colors are merely a facade, a red herring, a lie. This cartoon is not a cartoon at all. It is not a caricature. It is not caricature, despite adopting caricature as its visual style and tone. But I don't really like to speak in broad sweeping generalizations about Garfield. The comic has been running for over 30 years and to try to boil that all down is just, well, it's impossible. I think the only way that any historian worth his salt will agree with me is to look at individual moments, isolated instances, single comic strips. Can I discuss this one strip in the context of the entire run of Garfield? Yes. I do that just as a film historian who might analyze one movie in relation to the history of all movies, or a war enthusiast might look at a single battle's impact on an entire war. The pipe strip is just an instance in the lives of John and Garfield. Perhaps John is not a pragmatist at all. Let's look at this again. Maybe John is exhibiting the traits of a rationalist thinker. His question, now where could my pipe be, is a clue to this thought process stems from the early rationalist questions posed by René Descartes. The well-known quote, "I think, therefore I am," attributed to Descartes, is applicable. Another close look at the strip, and we see that Jim Davies chose to draw John thinking his question, "Now where can my pipe be?" John does not speak this question aloud, so Jim Davies is also exploring the mind-body duality. John's question operates on the level of a literal question, but it also examines the nature of reality. Jim Davies' epistemological approach tells us something about human condition. John's thoughts remain the focal point of this strip. This comic is quite literally centered around his thought, "Now where could my pipe be?" And this is his reality. This is where cognition and the power and the function of the mind take over. As Plato believed, the body is just a shell for John Arbuckle. Yes, he can use his physical body to read his paper or cross his legs. But these inputs of touch, sight, hearing, etc., these senses are the triggers of the mind. As we see here, the mind is something greater. It is the originator of ideas, and ideas are forever, immortal, immortality through thought. A major theme in literature and philosophy. And isn't that what Mr. Jim Davies himself has achieved? Will he live forever? The universe will continue to spread and spread outward, and entropy will turn a chaotic infinity into a homogeneous controlled system. This will take billions of years, and in that time humans will push technology to heights we can't imagine. We'll explore and inhabit space and occupy more and more of the universe, just as time allowed our ancestors to multiply numbers and populate more and more of the earth. And as the specific people come and go, their physical bodies will be born and grow and die, but their thoughts will remain. And Jim Davies comics, his glorious Garfield comics, are recorded ideas of those that will still be here even when the earth is no longer inhabitable and humanity has long since moved away to bigger planets. They carry with them a record we all keep. Mark my words, and look at what we've started. What is the internet? What is the online world, if not a record? Never-ending feed of ideas, immortal ideas, forever placed in the ether of dualism. What is an idea? Where does it live? How does it manifest itself? Can it live forever? Will it live forever? Outside of these physical husks of ours, our bodies, and John Arbuckle and Garfield started merely as thoughts, but they've become so much more. That old cliche rings true. They've taken on a life of their own, and life may not be what we think. Life brings to mind a beating heart, breathing lungs, blinking eyes, but the real life is in our imaginations. And who better embodies the definition of imagination if not a single man, a cartoonist, who puts his ideas to paper so that they may live on, so that our children and our children's children and their children's children's children can access the wealth of ideas that have accumulated thus far. They will plug themselves into an information grid and they will have access. Jim Davies. They will read every Garfield comic. 80,000 years from now, a child will see a simple John Arbuckle reading a newspaper. He will feel around for something, but that something is not there. He will lift his head and think, now where can my pipe be? And Garfield will be smoking the pipe, and John will yell Garfield, and what then? 80,000 years from now. The child reading this comic will smile, and that smile will transcend space and time and the physical limitations of this existence. Whatever they may be, however many dimensions exist, there will always be Garfield, and there will always be its creator, Jim Davies.